Today, I'll be talking about how a country's political economy affects its economic development and how this influences international businesses when they decide where to invest or to operate. Okay? So, in the previous chapter, we learned about the different types of political, economic, and legal systems that exist in the countries around the world. So now, we are going to see how those differences actually affects how developed a country becomes and how attractive it is for doing a business. So, what do you think is political economy? To simplify, it is a combination of a country's politics, economy, and laws. So these three things work together to create either a good or bad environment for the growth and investment. So let's look at some real life examples. So, for example, in the Philippines, our country has a democratic government and a mixed economy, meaning we have both private businesses and government involvement businesses. Because we've been making efforts to improve our infrastructure and digital economy, the foreign businesses like Google, Lazada, and Coca-Cola see the Philippines as a good place for investment. Okay? So, however, issues like corruption and slow bureaucracy can still make companies hesitate from investing to us. But then, on the other hand, or another example, Vietnam, even though it's a communist country, it has adopted market-based reforms. So this means they have opened up their economy to global trade. So as a result, companies like Samsung and Nike have huge factors there now, which boost employment and also development. So next, in Egypt. For years, Egypt's government was very controlling and corrupt under Hosni Mubarak. So even though the country introduced market reforms, the lack of political freedom and widespread corruption created a lot of uncertainty. Okay? So after the 2011 revolution, people hope for more democracy and better governance. But because Egypt's future is still unpredictable, foreign businesses are careful when considering investment in Egypt. So, therefore, over the past 30 years, more and more countries have moved toward democracy, like market economies and stronger legal systems. So, this has led to greater development and better conditions for doing international businesses. So why this has led to greater development and better conditions for doing international business? Just because businesses like stability, okay? They want to operate in countries where the rules are clear, property is protected, and corruption is low, okay? So they want that because they love stability. They need to make sure that the country is stable before investing, because although businesses are risk takers, they also need to be careful in investing in every countries, because it's their business and it's for the sake of their business. Okay, that's why, guys, understanding political economy isn't just for politicians. It's also important for companies, investors, and even us as future professionals and entrepreneurs needs to understand what is kung ano yung ang pinapaikot ng political economy, for us to know and to be aware sa mga possibilities or kailangang i-consider bago mag-invest, especially if you are considering on establishing a company or businesses. Okay, so you need to pag-aralan ang ganitong topic if you are planning to have some in the future. Okay, now different countries have different levels of economic development. And one way to measure this is through GNI per capita, or the average income of people in a country. So, for example, in 2009, Japan had a GNI per person of about $38,000. But in China, had only $3,650, and India has $1,180. But we need to also remember that GNI also can be misleading. It doesn't account for the cost of living in each country. That's why we use something called PPP, or the triple P, which means purchasing power parity, which adjusts the income based on what people can actually buy in their country. Paano ko ba siya gawing example? Think of it like this. $1 in the US might buy you a burger. But in India, that same $1 could buy you a full meal. So even if incomes are lower in India, the cost of living is also lower. Okay? So it depends on the countries, no? So for example, another example, in the Philippines, your $1 can buy, or your $5, or kung i-convert natin yung mga sa 250 plus or more, okay? Sa $5 mo is makakabili ka na ng ilang kilong bigas, or should we say ilang kilong bigas pa yun? Siguro mga 4 kilos ng bigas, ganun. So sa $5 mo, makakabili ka na ng 4 kilos na bigas. While sa Amerika, hindi ka makakapili ng ganun karaming bigas. Siguro yung 4 kilos mo na bigas, sa Amerika, magiging 2 kilos lang. Okay? Because the cost of living sa Amerika is very high compared sa Philippines. Okay? So that's the example of PPP. But you know what? Despite being considered poor in GNI terms, China and India are already huge economies and they are growing fast. So in fact, in 2010, China passed Japan as the second biggest economy after the United States, okay? As we all know, United States is the biggest economy right now because of their size and the growth. But many international companies are now investing in China and India. Even if profits are still like small today, but they are thinking more in the future, okay? So they think, even though ang income ngayon is very small, they think that India can be progressive and could have a massive potential in income. Okay? Now, let's talk about a deeper and more human view of development introduced by Amartya Sen. He is a Nobel Prize winning economist. Okay? So, Sen argues that development should not just be about money or income, like GNA or GNI per capita. Instead, it should focus on the real freedoms and opportunities that people have in life. That means, can people live healthy lives? Do they have access to education? Are they free to make choices and participate in society or in their society? So for Sen, real development means removing things that limit our freedom, like poverty, lack of education, bad healthcare, and even political oppression. He believes development is not just economic, it's also political and social. So, to conclude or to make it shorter, according to Sen, hindi lamang about politics ang economic development, okay? Or ang development. She said, or she argues that development is about the freedom, not the money, that the political views or whatsoever, but the freedom to choose whatever you want, okay? The freedom of people in the country, okay? Sen specifically emphasizes healthcare for children and education for women. Why do you think Sen specifically emphasizes healthcare for children and education for women? Why? Because when people are healthy and educated, we all know that they can do more. They can earn more and they can contribute more to the society. But also, being healthy and educated is a basic human decency and basic human right. So, Sen's ideas inspired the United Nations to create the Human Development Index or the HDI. Unlike the GNI or General Net Income, HDI looks at the following, or they are three factors that GNI looks at, which is the life expectancy, the educational levels, and the income. Okay? The HDI gives countries a score between 0 and 1. So here is the scale. Below 0.5 is low human development or poor quality of life. 0.5 to 0.8 is a medium development. Above 0.8 naman is high development. So that is what Sen's theory about all. Okay? That is what Sen's arguing about healthcare and education, because he believes that without healthcare and without education, people cannot do more. Okay? They cannot do the best they cannot do their best if they don't have the healthcare and also the education. So this index is much closer to Sen's vision, though he also believes that political freedom should be included, something like HDI still lacks. Okay, so in short, Amartya Sen teaches us that development isn't just about having more money. It's about giving people the freedom and ability to live the life they chose. So now, do you think that there is a development in our city or in our country. If I will going to have my opinion, I do believe that in general or in our country, Philippines, there is not or there's no progressive development na kung saan tuloy-tuloy. There is like development pero it's not enough, okay, for us people, no? And into our city naman, we can see or we can like witness the progressive environment of our city, starting from the infrastructures, the governance, the way of tradings and stuff, and establishment of different buildings that can help our society becomes better when it comes to taxes or to economic development as well. Okay, now let's talk about the connection between the country's political economy and its economic progress to properly conclude this report. So according to the study, many experts have believe that a country's level of development is strongly influenced by its political and economic systems. In other words, it is how a government is run, how free the markets are, how fair the legal system is. So that all of these affect how fast a country grows and how much progressive it is. But you know what? Here's the thing. There is no simple or perfect answer to explain the relationship between political economy and the economic development. People have been debating about it for years, and they think that there is many views and opinions about this. Okay, so this kind of issues is still existing and talk of the country. Okay, so what do you think? What do you think the relationship of political economy and economic development? Does it help the economy be progressive, or without collaboration ba ng dalawang ito, or kung wala bang relationship ang dalawang ito, does our country can still stand and work as one? Or do you think that kahit walang political or politics, like walang namumuno, just us people, just us with freedom, do you think our country will be progressive? We will know from the other reporters. Okay?
Good morning, everyone. I am Princess Ling P. Basil. Now, let's move on to innovation and entrepreneurship are the engines of growth. Innovation means new ideas, products, or strategies. Next is entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship creates new businesses and jobs. Sa madaling salita, kapag may bagong product o idea, tumataas ang sales ng negosyo at lumalakas ang economy. Gaya ng pagbuo ng bagong apps o bagong paraan ng pagbebenta, yun ang tinatawag na innovation. Kapag naman may taong handang magsimula ng negosyo, ang tawag sa kanya ay entrepreneur. They called as the engines of growth because both help the economy grow by innovation and entrepreneurship. Next is the innovation and entrepreneurship requires strong property rights. Strong legal protection of property rights is another requirement for a business environment to be conducive to innovation, entrepreneurial activity, and hence economic growth. Both individuals and businesses must be given the opportunity to profit from innovative ideas. These rights ensure that individuals and businesses can profit from their ideas without fear that their earnings will be taken away by criminals or even the government through things like high taxes or corruption. Sa madaling salita, sa market economy, malaya ang mga tao na magnegosyo at kumita. Hindi lahat hawak ng gobyerno, kaya mas may opportunity ang mga tao na mag-innovate at magsimula ng sariling negosyo. Next is the required political system. Much debate surrounds which kind of political systems best achieves a functioning market with strong protection for property rights. Many people believe that democracy leads to economic growth, but this is not always the case. Some non-democratic or totalitarian governments like China, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong experience rapid growth while being undemocratic. Next is the economic progress begets democracy. As countries grow richer, people begin to demand more rights, more freedom, and better government. Democracy is not required for a country to start economic growth or have a market economy with protected property rights. Economic progress often leads to democracy over time. Countries like South Korea and Taiwan started with non-democratic governments but became more democratic as their economies grew.
Geography, education, and economic development. Geography shapes economies as coastal and temperate regions thrive through trade and fewer environmental hurdles. Education also fuels growth. South Korea outpaced peers like Pakistan with higher school enrollment. Geography, education, and economic development are closely connected. Countries with favorable geography, like access to coastlines or mild climates, often find it easier to trade, farm, and grow economically. For example, coastal areas can build ports and engage in international commerce. Education also plays a key role in development. Countries that invest in education, like South Korea, often experience faster growth because a skilled and knowledgeable workforce can support innovation and productivity. In contrast, countries with less access to education, such as Pakistan, may face slower economic progress. States in transition. Since the late 1980s, many nations have moved from totalitarian regimes and planned economies to democracy and market systems, reflecting a global shift towards economic liberalization and political accountability. The term states in transition refers to countries that have changed their political and economic systems. Since the late 1980s, many nations, especially in Eastern Europe and parts of Asia and Africa, have moved away from totalitarian governments and centrally planned economies. They are shifting toward democracy where citizens have more political freedom and market economies where businesses operate with less government control. This global trend shows a move toward greater political accountability and economic liberalization, aiming for freedom, growth, and better living standards. The spread of democracy. Democracy grew from 69 nations in 1987 to 115 by 2010, fueled by economic discontent, technology, and rising middle classes. Yet, it remains fragile in places like Russia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Middle East. The spread of democracy refers to the increase in the number of countries adopting democratic systems of government. Between 1987 and 2010, the number of democracies grew significantly, largely because of public frustration with poor economies. The influence of technology, like the internet and media, and the rise of educated middle classes demanding more political rights. However, democracy is still fragile in many regions. In countries like Russia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and parts of Middle East, governments may hold election but still limit freedoms or concentrate power, making true democracy difficult to maintain.
After ng Cold War, nag-end ang communism form of governance, and yung mga tao, nagkaroon sila ng iba't ibang prediction kung ano ang magiging new form of governance. So according to Fukuyama, ang New World Order ay dinescribe niya bilang global triumph of liberal democracy. So sinasabi niya na ang liberal democracy ay ang most successful and desirable form of government. So he predicted na ang principles ng liberal democracy ay i-adapt ng mga countries which can lead to global peace and harmony. Pero kinontra yun ni Huntington. Ayon sa kanya, magko-continue pa rin ang conflicts pero magsisimula na ito sa cultural and religious differences rather than ideology. Market-based system is driven by supply and demand and not government control. So simula ng 1980s, from centrally planned command economies kung saan government ang nagdedictate ng productions and price ng isang product to market-based system na ang tinitignan sa pagdetermine ng price ay ang supply and demand, which is yun yung ginagamit ng mga businesses ngayon. Over 30 countries na ang nagtatransform sa market-based system, kasama na dito ang former Soviet Union states and Eastern European Communist Bloc countries. At pati na rin ang Asian, African, and Latin American countries. So, ang goal ng pag-transform nila ay ma-achieve ang sustained economic performance na may kita sa mga countries na nag-adapt sa market-based system. Deregulation means reducing government intervention and control in the economy. So bago matapos ang communism, sobrang higpit ng government sa pagkontrol ng prices and outputs ng products. They prohibited private enterprises in operating most of the sectors of economy. So nirestrict nila yung
mga direct investment ng foreign enterprises, and naglimit din sila sa mga international trade. Kaya after nag-collapse ang communism, nung nagkaroon ng deregulation, na-remove ang pagkakaroon ng price controls which allow prices to be set sa pamamagitan ng demand and supply. At mas naging free din ang economy para makipag-connect sa iba't ibang countries. Privatization means transferring of ownership of a government-owned entity to the private sector. So the goal is to boost economic efficiency through incentivizing new owners to increase productivity, enter new markets, and exit unprofitable ones. So the process of privatization is often involves deregulation to foster competition. So nagsimula ang privatization sa Great Britain noong early 1980s under kay Margaret Thatcher with the sale of British Telecom. So, ang example ng privatization ay ang Petron Corporation. So, na-privatize sila noong 1994 to increase efficiency and competitiveness in the oil industry. So, ang goal nila is to reduce its financial burden and allow the private sector to manage the oil company more effectively. So, ang naging impact nito is naging leading oil company sila sa Philippines, pero naka-experience din sila ng criticism sa paraan ng pag-price nila and yung mga environmental concerns ng mga tao. Legal system is a framework of rules that society uses to interpret and enforce its law. So, ang legal system is important ito sa growing economy kasi nagsisilbi itong stable framework sa mga transactions, nagpo-protect ito sa property rights, and nagbe-build ito ng trust and investment. Kung walang legal system, maaaring maka-experience ang isang economy ng disruptions and potentially mag-collapse. So, maaaring mag-hesitate din ang mga investors na mag-invest at mag-trade sa mga businesses.
So our next is implication for managers. So a country political, economic, and legal environments significantly influence its attractiveness as a market or investment site. Countries with democratic regimes, market-based economics, and strong property rights protects tends to experience a sustainable economic growth, making them more favorable for international business. So, as a business manager, we must study the political, economic, and legal environments or the legal systems for a country before investing it. So, countries with democracy has a strong property rights and sustainable governments are better choice for the investment because they are offer long-term growth. They are offer better long-term growth. Next is the benefits. Benefits is the long-term benefits depends on the market size, current consumer wealth, purchasing power, and futures prospects. So here the benefits. There are big benefits, especially in investing in early countries that are growing. Like for example, if we enter early, we can build brand loyalty. Next is if we get to know how the business work in that country. Like for example, in South Korea, they are poor in 1960s, but the company's investment early and they are gained a lot by 2010 when it became a top economy. So, tinatawag yun as a first move advantage kasi if we are late, we might face a disadvantage like high competitions or difficulty entering the market. Next is the cost. Business costs are affected by political, economic, and legal factors. So in some countries, companies may face demands for bribe to operate, especially in a closed totalitarian state. So sa cost naman is doing a business in same countries can be expensive due to political, economic, and legal costs. Sa political costs, they are paying bribes or dealing with the corrupt officials. Sa economic costs naman, they are build their own infrastructures because the country systems are weak or mas mahina. For example, yung McDonald's sa Russia, they had to grow their own potatoes and build their own supply chain. So sa legal cost naman, some countries don't have clear laws, which can lead to stolen ideas, contracts are not being followed, or legal fights. Next is the risk. Business risks are also influenced in political, economic, and legal factors. So we have three categorized as risk, which is the political risk, economic risk, and legal risk. Same sila dun sa cost. Meron naman, ay sa cost is we have political cost, economic cost, and legal cost. Dito naman is we have political risk, economic risk, and legal risk. So, yung sa political risk, maraming changes in government, protests, wars, or new laws na makakasama doon sa business. For example, doon sa Iran, after the revolution, US companies lost everything with no compensation. Yun yung example sa political risk. So, economic risk naman, when the government mismanage money, it means hindi na-handle na maayos yung pera, it can leads to problem like inflation or magkakaroon ka ng utang or mababaon ka sa utang. Kasi, may example doon nung 1997 to 1998 kasi madaming Asians katulad ng Thailand and Indonesia, they have faced financial crisis because too much of debt or utang, kasi madami yung utang nila and they have a bad banking. Dito naman sa legal risk naman is this happens when the laws don't protect the business. So, katulad na lang din like for example, noong 1970s sa India, they passed a law that they force a foreign companies to work with the Indian partners, making them lose control and profits. So, to sum up lang, growing countries are attractive pero risky. So managers should carefully study a country's political, economic, and legal environment. Dapat may goal ka para mabalance yung benefit mo kapag gagawa ka ng business with the cost and risk. Lastly is kapag mag-enter ka ng early in a good countries, or entering early in a good countries, it can give you a big advantage, but kailangan maging prepared ka sa mga challenges. That's all.